Hello, SCR listeners. Anthony here. Just a heads up on this week's episode, there was a little audio issue at a certain point with Darnell's mic during our live recording. This issue does not go on for the whole episode. So that's all I wanted to share. As always, thank you for your continued support as we work to improve our content. Hope you enjoy this episode.
If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Report.
Hear ye, come one, come all. You are listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Joel Nikoloff and Darnell Sanders.
Not gonna lie, before we jumped on here, I was like trying to brainstorm with my wife about how I could bring some sort of prosthetic mask or arm or something into the shot for comedic effect, but I didn't have such thing lying around my house.
No. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I mean,
no props necessary.
No props necessary. I think people saw the title, kind of know where we're going with this one. We're going to talk about the Trafalgar High School teacher with the big prosthetic breasts, trans teacher with the prosthetic breasts. Yeah. And so it's gone pretty viral. It first came to my attention on WhatsApp. My aunt messaged me a bit
asking for your 2 cents.
Yeah. She was really disgruntled. Yeah, she was. She was really disgruntled. You know, me as a teacher and Christian, and seeing this. So she sent me the blog TO. Shout out to Blog TO. Actually, Blog TO is very helpful for date nights. So shout out to Blog TO.
What, giving you ideas on how to
restaurants, like restaurants and stuff like that. They have like a little restaurant section. But anyways, so about 14 days ago, video footage and photos of a Toronto area. I wouldn't consider Trafalgar, Oakville, Toronto. But anyways, video footage and photos of a Toronto area high school teacher are blowing up online today, sparking a racist debate about what educators should and shouldn't wear to work. It appears as though many social media users first became aware of the teacher in question, and more specifically, the sizable prosthetic bust she wears, when an American radio host tweeted a series of images said to have been captured at Oakville Trafalgar High School. I'll post a clip in the show notes. So the teacher's a shop teacher, and Joel, and the chest is like really abnormally, unusually pretty big. But Joel, what was your first take?
My first take on this was sort of like, I knew like this is going to be interesting, right? In the culture we're in the dynamic that things are, with the manner in which, let's say, the trans debate, if you want to call it that, has been transpiring. I knew instantly that this was going to be a spectacle, and I don't mean the individual. I sort of mean the commentary and everything around it,
coverage.
Yeah, the lack thereof.
Lack thereof.
I was expecting there to be sort of this dilemma, because for those on, let's just say, the left, for simplicity, this teacher is kind of like what many people who end up in the center of politics, the commentary is generally things along the lines of the left needs to criticize the left more and the right needs to criticize the right more, in the sense that those that are, stepping out of line on that are on your side or in your camp, they need to be put in their place for where they're stepping out of line. And so
Yeah.
in context here, I was not surprised that we sort of saw this silence from the left in terms of any sort of criticism towards
Yeah.
this individual.
Okay. Yeah. We'll definitely get to that.
So without getting ahead,
hold
that
on.
was
Yeah.
my first expectation. That was what we would see.
Okay. All right. And so for the listeners, the direction we're going in is what's up with Canada's public school system, and we're also going to address teacher dress code, and like Joel just mentioned, the silence as it relates to why the silence about supporting the teacher. All right. So what's up with Canada's public school system? What does the school system supporting of the school or of the teacher? What does it show us? Or how did we get here?
I mean, I think for me, it highlights that we've gotten to a place where the primary focus of our education system is not what it's supposed to be.
What do you mean?
So I would say children and the education of children purely, and my attitude would be purely on fundamental education, right? Fundamental skills, right? That, to me, that is the primary focus of education. Now, not to say that, and I'm thinking of, primary school, and then obviously as it gets into post-secondary, which is this context, the focus would still be students, but let's say education to prepare them for adulthood. But again, I would think about that from a fundamental skills perspective, and a preparation for the career path that they're choosing to take. So in the context of this discourse, look at commentary from the school boards, look at commentary from anyone in the media that's semi defending this teacher, and no, there's no commentary on the classroom, the impact on the classroom, the impact on the education, whether there's no impact, or, like, to me, that would be the criteria that this scenario should be evaluated upon. The students, the impact on the students, the impact on the education, whether or not the education of the students is being impacted. If someone made the case in theory that we don't need to do anything because the education of the students is not hindered, okay, fine, make that case. That's the argument that I want to hear, as let's call it, as justification. I don't necessarily know that that's not being done, but I would say it's definitely not being done publicly.
What do you mean it's not being done?
So what I mean is, like, I don't know if internally the discourse from a school board is whether or not education of the children are impacted. But what I do know is that that is not part of the discourse from, let's say, the left. There was a protest that I saw. I think I have it on a True North's Twitter page. There's a video from the September 23rd. I don't know if the protest happened on this day, but the date of the tweet itself was September 23rd. But it looks like a pretty sizable number of parents showed up to protest, and that would have been that would have been Friday the 23rd. And I think that was the day that I heard a number of students, or I should say teachers, stood up and protested, or showed up to Oakville Trafalgar High School to protest. So the reason I'm saying this is I would suggest that most of these parents are making a case. The ones that are protesting or showing up to protest are making a case based on the educational impact on their child. Right now, maybe it's ideological education, which someone could dispute as being, the same as what I'm suggesting, and I'm that's why I'm pointing it out. But inherently, the focus is on the students and the impact that this situation would have on them. And I think that is the right context for the conversation. Not to say that all the arguments are appropriate or correct, but I think that's the context for the conversation. And as I said, it's what you don't see it all from the right for the most part. All of the statements have come out about, and we'll show a video later potentially, or when it makes sense. Everything seems to be about the teacher and defending the teacher and nothing about the students. And to me, I would expect that with socialized education, because the two primary actors in this scenario are government, because they're the one funding it, and teachers, because they're the ones in control of it. And really, I mean the teachers union. So the teachers union and the government are the primary decision makers in our education system. So consequently, the students are, collateral damage when decisions are being made. Now, everybody would probably argue that they're trying to do what's best by the students by proxy. The problem is they don't bear the consequence. Neither of those two bear the consequences of the bad decisions they make. The students bear the consequences. And so this is where, as I said, that's where education goes when it's publicly funded, right? The primary consumer of education is children, and they really don't have a voice, or I should say, a strong voice. And that's why a friend of ours whose episode of podcast we've been on, both of us have been on the Anarchist Bible Study podcast. Jeff Park has started I think it's called Alberta's Parents Union, for this sort of very scenario. Well, not this particular scenario, but what I'm talking about, where parents don't really have a strong voice to defend, even though they're the primary, they would be able to argue, I would suggest, more in line with their children's needs and be the best one for it in this conversation. But as we can see, it seems like more and more parents are trying to be silenced in the conversation about education. And I would suggest, if you notice what's going on in the U.S. with the reformation towards more charter school systems and funding following the student, not the school system, or not funding the school system, there is a bit of a pushback from parents trying to take back that power that they've seemingly have been tried to, push to the side from.
Okay, and so
go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess that brings up the question what the article was kind of bringing up about the dress code. And I guess that's been an issue, and you brought that up as well. You brought up a good question about what if the teacher's chest wasn't that big? Would this be an issue?
Yeah, what if this wasn't large prosthetic breasts that are like, I don't know where I heard this, but I think some of the commentary I heard on this, basically, if you go to the website for where they sell these, there's like a warning label on the promo video for the product, and they're classified as like Z cups. Okay, so the question that I'm postulating is, if this was a teacher wearing standard prosthetic breasts, I don't know what the proper terminology would be, would there even be a conversation happening? Now, I think you potentially have scenarios where a conversation should happen, and if I want to, hash out what I'm saying, right? So, if this was a grade 2 class, and halfway through the year, a teacher made the transition and was going to show up with regular size prosthetic breasts, I think there should be a conversation about, if you were centered on education and children, is the middle of the year the appropriate timing for the students as a and obviously I'm not saying you just dismiss the teacher, outright, but in theory, a resolution could be that the teacher changes schools to make the transition so that it's not disruptive on the children. And I use grade 2 as an example where you're likely going to create a high level of confusion within the students. And so again, that's where I would make that example of where I think that's a potential resolution. The other side of that, if we move into high school, could you have a similar discourse again if you were focused on children and their education and come to a different conclusion? Maybe. But with the absurdity of the size, it changes the discourse altogether. And so I think there's a great video that I think we should run it now. I think Rebel News was I saw it shared through True North originally, but it did have Rebel News as the video credit. So take a look here at the principal, I think, of the school in question, Oakville Trafalgar, and the reason I find this video interesting is that the principal has this like very plateau type of an answer, non-specific, sort of platitudes is sort of what I meant to say. And his body language is a little bit of like uncomfortable, sort of the person who knows they got to say something, but they're just sort of stuck in the middle. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. I'm just saying based on the body language, it's almost like he didn't necessarily want to be there. So, and then we got some questions or comments from Frank White, which sounds like a pseudonym name, but if it isn't, my bad. But my understanding is we know this guy from CLS days, so maybe we'll figure out who's behind the mask. But anyways, we'll jump into those comments that if you're on YouTube catching our live stream, you'd be able to comment too. So let's roll the clip and then we'll jump into that.
Sorry, before we roll the clip, so the guy is Curtis Ennis. So he's the Halton District School Board Trustees appointed new Director of Education.
Okay. Sorry. Good point. Yeah, the guy talking isn't.
Yeah, because I recognized him. Okay.
So go ahead, Anthony, roll the clip.
So we are, as a board, we are committed to human rights, and we're committed to supporting all our teachers and staff and students in an environment that upholds their dignity, their gender identity, and their gender expression, right? Issues around safety are matters that we deal with on an ongoing basis, and we continue to deal with those issues, not just with this teacher, but with all teachers. So that is something that we're committed to health and safety for all our students and staff.
But I noticed, Mr. Innes, you can't display nipples as part of the dress code of the Halton District School Board. All of his outfits, he's displaying nipples. In the shop, he's wearing long sleeves. Those massive prosthetic breasts are near cutting equipment. I would argue if this was a student doing this, it would not be tolerated. So why does this person get such leeway?
You keep saying he. The first thing is we are, being respectful of all of our gender identity and gender expression of all of our staff, and we are supportive of our staff and our students. The dress code is for students, and the dress code is not for staff. The dress code is for students.
Okay.
So I mean, I think Frank's got a great comment that's a good follow up. What's within their collective agreement? What's the teachers union standard? Those are all very good points or comments, questions. I think it really comes down to the teachers union arguably being stuck between a rock and a hard place because of arguably a human rights violation for the teachers union if they don't handle this a certain way. And so again, that's where I say teachers union, government, the focus isn't on the student, the primary consumer of education. It's on the teachers because essentially, well, of course, the incentives force us to care about government politicians getting reelected and the teachers union preserving themselves, and the education system being a collateral damage in the middle.
Right. Okay. So now, as it relates to the silence, supposed silence, because I posted on Twitter, on the Twitter Sixth Sense Report account, the Instagram account, the Facebook account, and I was asking, does anybody know any teachers or anybody that is, I think, in support of the teacher? Now, I posted a couple times to see if anybody knew any or had any articles or knew anybody that was supporting it, but I think it all nobody came up with anything.
Yeah, no, and I think our media is just as guilty as everybody else in this, right? And I think the silence is universal, and this is what I was saying, right? Nobody on the left is willing to criticize and saying, okay, no, this is not appropriate, because it's all virtue signaling. There's no principles involved here in these positions around the trans debate, right? It's not what are the truths that we're actually going to use as benchmarks, or what are the principles we're going to. No, it's virtue signaling platitudes. And that's where, my comment about, the video of this guy speaking on the issue is that he says a lot, but he doesn't say anything at the same time. Like, he doesn't really say anything specific to the context or address the context, other than like a general overriding statement of how they would treat a teacher in a particular reference to, gender identity. Right? No commentary on, yes, we recognize that there's potentially inappropriateness with regards to this, right? Like, I mean, I don't want to speculate too much on the teacher and their motivations, but there's definitely a nature to this that seems, again, based on the absurdity of the size, that seems sort of either sexualized or fantasized. Like, again, that's my pre-inclination when I see something that is essentially cartoonizing women, right? Like, it's just off. If we go back to the end of the gender episode, we talked about this term in that was called like paraphilia, right? Sort
Something
of
like that.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact term, but I had it in the show notes page. If you go back to that episode, in the Wikipedia talks through it a bunch, and it's that sexualization for slightly absurd things. And I just say that because it was like talking about cars and different things, but the cartoonish nature of the female body that is being represented here leads me to question, is this what's at stake? And maybe it's not. I'm just asking the question because if the answer is yes, I have an even greater problem with this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we're allowing a teacher potentially to do something that is sexually arousing in the classroom, but we're not willing to have a conversation about it. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't in the trans context, there would be no doubt as to how we would respond to this. Now, again, I want to be clear. Those are questions I'm asking that we're not allowed to have the conversation about. I'm not trying to pass judgment or say that is the case for this individual. But if we can't ask the question, that's a problem. So, I mean, Darnell, for you as a teacher, obviously we didn't have anyone willing to, we were really asking someone to come on the show and talk about this to some extent, if anyone was willing. And I'm not surprised because I would think if you're a progressive and you are for largely most of the trans conversation, this teacher is actually a problem for you as well, because it's arguably a bit of a black eye on the movement you're trying to make, or you're trying to move forward with. And so criticizing them largely would be viewed as a weakness towards your movement. So you're better off just being silent. Don't say nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. No, it's definitely concerning, and I was hoping to see some teachers speak up, but I think it's just like I think it's important for people who are on the right to check people on the right, because sometimes people on the right are wrong, and you gotta check your
Pun
people,
intended.
and then people on the left need to check people on the left, whatever the case may be. But I'm sure there are people in the trans community who are kind of like, nah, we're not co-signing on that one. Just like in the black community, stuff that in the black community, you sit back, you're like, nah, they represented us. Um, and I guess it comes back to the point that you made, like maybe looking at, yeah, like the Jesse Smollett,
Ju-
uh, um,
Juicy smoothie.
yeah, in that situation, um, Frank Frank White, aka Rafer, says, "What if a student came in skin tight pants, showing clearly his or her private?" Um, yeah,
Camel
yeah.
toe or just, I don't
Um,
know. What do you, moose
or
knuckle?
or 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 as a Jamaican say, pokey printer. Um, but I would say to Frank White's comment that what if it in this context what if it's the teacher, right, not the student? What if it's the teacher? Because this is what we're talking about. It's the teacher dress code. And I would say I think most workplaces have gone away from the dress code. Most white collar places have gone away from the dress code. But I think that the teaching profession is one of the oldest professions in the history of the world, next to what, construction, prostitution,
Farming.
right, farming, right. So all of them have their particular uniforms, and a way to dress, and so you can get the job done, right. So right, the prostitute don't go to work in Nike Tech fleece, sweatpants and a hoodie, right. You ain't doing your job, right.
No,
you
no
ain't
one's
you
gonna know what you're there for.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
dress code
yeah,
is a
like,
signal.
yeah, you ain't ready to work, boo, right. Same thing with a construction worker. You're not going to work with a pair of Clarks on,
Yeah, yeah.
right. And same thing with the teacher. I think that there's a point where you don't want to be a distraction, and it's also a preaching principle, right. You don't want to be a distraction, to take away from the learning. But I would say with the pants, to Frank's point, that, so for example, um gray track pants for men, right, that's usually a no-no, right. So even as a man, whether you're packing or you're not, um it's not wise to wear Nike Tech fleece gray track pants to class, right. You just don't want to, even from a Christian standpoint, you don't want to be a stumbling block.
Mm.
And then hold on, and then Frank White says, still, this is going to be a floodgate of sexual perversion to the max. I would disagree. I would disagree, just in the sense, um, that I don't know, Frank. Would you be fantasizing about your shop teacher like that?
Well,
You,
I think
you could put the comment. You could put your word in the comment if that's what Frank White's going to be fantasizing
no,
about. Then that's
I
what,
think
and
he's
that's him, and
referring.
that's okay, because Frank White that might be his thing, and I don't want to disrespect Frank, and for making those comments. I appreciate it. Um,
I think what he's talking about though is at the teacher side, right? Not so much necessarily the student side, right? Because that's the question I was pondering, right? If this is a teacher being sexualized or sexualizing the classroom, right? And we don't cut it off at the pass. I think that's the point that they're making, or Frank's making,
Frank
right?
said
That,
right. He said right.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
He's referring, but I think as a derivative, what you're saying is true as well. If the teacher is becoming sexualized in their presentation of themselves, and we're allowing that to slide, why wouldn't the classroom inherently have a more sexualized experience, which leads to the children being more sexualized, right? And so, I mean, your question or your comment was a little bit about like, being aroused or getting off by looking at a teacher like that.
No, that's Frank White. Frank, that's
Yeah,
what
no,
Frank White was saying. That's what he
but
does.
yeah, his comment. But you were sort of,
That's what, yeah.
you were sort of saying like, well, if he was in the classroom, is that what you're saying, that this would be,
It could be. It could be.
sexual perversion? No,
Oh,
sir.
no. For
No,
Frank,
sir.
Frank said no, sir. Just to be clear. But even though, like, right, even in modesty, right? Like, sometimes students, students go look at their teacher away, whatever. But I think there's a point where you just want to be wise, not to draw attention to yourself.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know. It's something for me to think about as well, because if it's a woman who has a biological, like her chest
Yeah.
is biologically like that,
Yeah, you may inevitably have kids that are aroused or whatnot, right? Like there's only so much you could do to prevent it, but that's where I think undue distraction is probably a good term.
and the issue was the nipples. The issue was the nipples showing.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. So you just to clarify that.
So and for anyone who doesn't know, there are pictures that you can tell where the shirts worn have a level of see-throughness to them. Well, that would allow you to both, the nipples are protruding through the shirt, but also you can see through the shirts. Which
yeah, but okay, yeah, but you know what, man? Come on, man. Let's keep it 100, man. Let's stop playing games, right? We all know what thirst trapping is, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want to be a thirst trap in the classroom, right? So, like, if a teacher comes in and his shirt's buttoned down to here and his chest is out, chill. If you're wearing hoochie daddy shorts, yeah, and no, we're just no, just
we ain't gonna do that.
yeah, for the ladies, the cleavage out, like, there's a sense where you're like, look, man, modesty is the best policy. You're there, like Joel said, you're there to serve the student, not yourself. So just, you have to be aware of, your students, and just there has to be a sense of discernment. And I think that's what people are kind of up in arms with, the lack of discernment, and and then the teachers union lack of discretion in regards to saying, hey, look, come on, bro, like, at least put a sweater on.
Yeah.
Another sweater.
Well, and on that teachers union point, all right, I'll read this. There's a link that from the Halton District School Board with their, like, let's call it statement, and there's this bolded section that I think just summarizes exactly what you're saying. And so let me read this and we can hash it out a little bit. Well, this is part of the statement about Oakville Trafalgar High School. It says, while we cannot confirm the identity of the individual in the photos, videos, radio segments, we can confirm that the individual is not Stephen Hanna. Stephen Hanna is a staff member of the Halton District School Board who is an entirely separate individual and completely unrelated to this matter. The reason why I want to bring that up, Stephen Hanna, I think, was somehow associated potentially or speculatively that was the individual in the pictures, and it wasn't that person. So while we get a very particular statement about Stephen Hanna, if we contrast that with the video that we shared, there's a very non-specific response. And again, this is the silence is deafening. I think it's very telling to parents and people who are concerned about this. The silence causes even more cause for concern.
Okay, so Joe, what's your 2 cents on the issue?
I think the 2 cents is, I don't know where I saw it. I want to say Maxime Bernier or someone tweeted something like, a picture of this and saying another ad for homeschooling. And I think, that's a quick way of summarizing my view on this, in that, so much of the discourse about education has become very much social indoctrination of the cultural norms that we want children to adapt to. And the school boards, and which essentially government by proxy, and the teachers unions largely have a leftist agenda. And a couple episodes ago, I think I made the comment that, people have a problem with colonization, but they have no problem colonizing my child's mind. And this is a prime example, right? This issue is an example of trying to impose an ideology, regardless of the consequences, on the children, because that's the agenda, or that's the objective. Because it's not just educating them for their career, it's educating them so they vote correctly. It's educating them so they have the right social perspectives. And very much you are having education or teachers that don't view the children as primary responsibility of their parents, but rather they're the primary responsibility person to make sure this child thinks correctly. So I mean, I'm obviously not all teachers are like that, and I don't mean to box in every teacher, but I think as a system, this is what's occurring, and what we're continuing to go down towards. And the punchline I like to give, or that I'm stealing, when we send our kids to Caesar, wonder why would they come back as Romans.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
So what's your 2 cents?
I think that when it comes to the education system, of course, right? And I've said this before, I believe that education starts at home. And and it's one of those things where you always have a choice, right? You always have a choice as a parent, right? Now, you can tell them to switch classes. You can save up and send the private school, or you can homeschool or change schools. But yeah, you always have an option. So if you don't like it, yeah, just it's time to move on. And that's my first point. My second point is, as a teacher, how of course we care about our students, and we don't want to be a stumbling block to our students' learning, whether it's the way we look, or the things we say, or the things we do. We have to try our best to not draw attention to us or away from our content, and or from what we're doing, right? Or drawing their minds away from the learning and to us, if that makes sense. So it's one of those things. It's a balance. I'm not going to say it's a science. It's more of an art. But what this teacher did was definitely put themselves out
Ahead
in
of
mainstream media. Yeah, in mainstream media, and drawing unnecessary attention. And when I mean unnecessary, I mean, yeah, cover up the nipples. Find a way, find a way to do that, because that's it's just a bit of just a little step in the right direction,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, in any context outside of a trans, we would, again, what you had said, right? A large-breasted woman, if her nipples are protruding as a teacher, we would deem that inappropriate,
Mhm.
right?
Right, because the
And so,
assumption is the teacher would know. But again,
right.
but part of it too is, like, I'm a teacher. I wear a shirt and tie every day, but every teacher has their own style,
Mhm.
right? Every teacher has their own style, and the way they dress, and that's fine. And you dress the way that you feel comfortable. But I just think there's a certain level of discretion, even community support that comes in, that says, "Hey, look, let's someone to come and say, hey, maybe your pants are a little too low. Pull your pants up. Maybe your chest is showing a little too much, male or female,
Mhm.
whatever or maybe or maybe you know you smell, right? You know, your BO is
Someone
you
someone
kicking
gotta
you
tell you need to take a shower every day.
yeah you kicking like Bruce Lee, right? Right. So somebody has to come and say, hey, look, man, this is taken away from the lesson, right? I used to have a teacher who had bad breath. Yeah, and I decided to fail the class. I was like, look, man, I ain't talking to this guy, man. Like, it's over, right?
I
These
can't
things.
stand there and listen to the answer because I'm
Oh
so
man, yeah,
distracted by the
nah,
smell.
nah. He's like, he come to you like, how can I help you? Like,
Get that dragon breath out of here.
yeah, you know what I mean? So you got to be careful as a teacher not to be a distraction, to your students. So again, for parents, students, just transfer, find a new school, find a new
How
system.
yeah. Well, and that's the dilemma with this socialized education system, right? You're left to, oh, we must move, right? Like you're moving to a location based on education because it's either that or I pay for an alternative.
Yeah,
And
or
for most
homeschool.
people, or
Yeah,
homeschool, but
yeah,
again, that's, chances are if you can't afford to go to a school, you can't afford to not have two incomes, so you can't
yeah,
afford to homeschool
yeah,
potentially. And so now you're left to moving to a place that has the education system or educators that you're okay that you feel is appropriate for your child.
yeah,
I do have, one last question that for you. I'm curious, I think about, you sort of said something along the lines of not making it, or you sort of said unduly about yourself. Um, and I think there's very much this idea, and I'm wondering how much you see this, of teachers sort of like, the profession is the place they're going to express themselves. And so now, like, I want my students to know all of who I am because in my teaching profession I express myself. And the reason I say it that way is I do see a level of tension between, you know, garnering trust by being real with students and
hmm
letting them see who you really are
hmm
and expressing yourself in a manner that is, engaging.
yeah,
um but that's why I sort of started with that concept of like unduly about yourself, or yourself becomes the priority as opposed to the goal of you being real is for the students. So I'm just curious, how much do you see a bit of that tension, or even that concept of like, I need to express myself, whether it be, it doesn't have to be the whole gender or trans part of the conversation, anything.
yeah. I would say that yes, you want to represent and who you are, and students may resonate with that. Even the trans teacher, right? The trans teacher dressing like that, showing up to school. I'm sure 100% the students were like, yo, power to the people,
Mm,
right? Like this teacher represents me, and
mm,
and there's students that look up to the teacher. And I would say like part of it is, especially for us is for us as Christians, it's a different dynamic, right? No matter what our identity is, we're like, well, no, you're not looking to me, right? You're looking to Christ, and all the treasures that He offers,
mm,
and not necessarily looking to us as an idol or the thing to be. Yes, it's good to have a role model, but I think that like there's a point where you can overdo it, and then you're becoming the main focus, or even to the point taking away from the lesson. um yeah, but there's definitely a balance, and I would argue that I'm sure that teacher definitely has the ears of some students, and probably has the booze of some students, right? But that's
yeah,
life. That's teaching. But basic economics, right? You always have a choice, and I think
yeah,
that's one of the point I was trying to make in my 2 cents. You always have
yeah,
a choice. Like if you don't like it, find a new school, man. Like, and then and you kind of say this too, like vote with your feet or vote with your dollars. And if everybody's like leaving or doing something else, then people are getting the message like, okay, we got to change up what we're doing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I didn't really touch on it, but but contrasting the socialized at school with the free market scenario, I would suggest that feedback loop would be much quicker, right? If enough students or enough families had a concern, and this was a school that was being paid for, either the school's going to have a problem because students are leaving and they can't, or more students come and there's an automatic signal, whether by revenue increasing or decreasing or not changing when something like this happens. But in the socialized education system, the revenue is so disconnected from the actual students in some regard that what you said in terms of taking action is going to be a really slow feedback loop, right? Like, it's not like I can move tomorrow, right? Not like I could enroll my kid. Now, arguably, maybe you could pull off homeschooling tomorrow after an incident like this, if that's what your response was in terms of, okay, my kid can't be here. But again, my point is that in the in a private education system, if any or private institution of education, if there was a scenario like this, likely you would have a very quick feedback mechanism because the parents, i.e. the students, are the primary means of funding, and they're going to go yes or no, this is a problem or not a problem, and it's going to impact the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I know some people would probably go, why are you comparing to free market? Well, because that is the place where you have really quick signals, right? I always say profit and prices are signals. When you remove profit and prices, you lose signals. And so that's the point. That's why contrasting with the free market is there, because I want to point out there's a lack of a signal. Do the students really approve of this? Like you said, I'm sure there's students that are like, yay. I'm sure there's students that are like, boo. The problem is we don't have the signals to measure that because we don't have prices and we don't have profits.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Shout out to This Is Salvation dropping in on the conversation. Says, we all know nipples. We all know nipples are no nipples. This is just plain weird and whack. LOL. Yeah. Thank you for your 2 cents. This Is Salvation. Anybody else who wants to join the conversation, make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and be ready to join the conversation.
Yeah, if you want to catch our lives, it might not be for a couple weeks, but usually Friday or Saturday nights. Watch for us on YouTube. The live will go up, and then it'll come down, and we'll publish usually the next Friday. So
so instead of so Friday nights, check us out. Instead of Netflix and chill, you could 6 cents and chill. Yeah, you could do both.
Although we'll probably have to plan for a good topic if you're Netflixing and chilling with your wife, hoping for a little something more. We might need a different conversation.
What do you mean? Our content's always hot, man. It always sets the mood.
Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna put your wife in the mood, but it might be intellectually stimulating. But yeah. Anyways, on that note, we'll hopefully come back and as Darnell said, join us, and you can join the conversation. And This Is Salvation and our boy Frank. You might get your comments on the
Frank
screen.
White, aka Rafer, aka Brother Man from the 4th floor, aka Blackbuster, aka the cell phone you gave me don't work.
You mean sold you? Anyways, on that note, if there's any aspect of this conversation, if there's any teachers any pro support of this teacher that you're aware of, please hit us up, 6centsreport@gmail.com or 6 Cents Report on Facebook and Twitter. We don't want to be out of the loop if there's more to this conversation that we've missed. So give us your 2 cents or someone else's 2 cents who's got something interesting to say on this topic.
6 cents makes change.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?
Madden and Mitchell Media.